Hey everyone, it's your boy Anime Issei, and today we're diving into another epic what if. This time, we're exploring what if Issei was the reincarnation of Igris. That's right, the loyal and fearsome Shadow Knight from Solo Leveling brought into the world of High School DxD. Things are about to get dark, powerful, and absolutely insane. So strap in, grab your favorite snack, and let's get into it. Crimson Knight vs. Shadow Monarch. The stone doors slammed shut behind him. Jinwoo walked slowly into the great hall. Silent, focused. The only sound was his boots echoing across the marble floor. Blue flames lit the torches lining the massive chamber. The light cast shadows across the stone pillars, and at the very center, waiting, was him. A knight in black and crimson armor. Still, unmoving, like a statue carved from the will of war itself. Igris. He stood tall, a dark long sword in hand, its blade humming faintly like it remembered 1,000 battles. His cape billowed from a wind that didn't exist. Jinwoo exhaled sharply. "You're the final trial, huh?" Igris raised his sword slowly, the steel singing as it pointed toward Jinwoo's chest. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. "I've fought beasts. I've bled against kings. I've stared death in the eyes more times than I can count. But you." Jinwoo tightened his grip on his dual daggers. His eyes sharpened. "You're the first who feels like a true knight." Igris moved. Not a lunge, just a step forward. Smooth. Controlled. The weight of his presence slammed into the chamber like thunder. Jinwoo smiled. Then charged. Steel met steel. The entire room shook from the first clash. Sparks danced around them like fireflies. Igris countered, forcing Jinwoo back with a powerful sweep. Jinwoo rolled, sprang up, and lashed out again. The knight blocked each strike effortlessly, his blade never wavering, his stance unbreakable. "You don't talk much." Jinwoo grunted between swings. "Let me guess, silent type with a code." Igris responded with a rapid series of strikes, each one sharp, elegant, lethal. Jinwoo barely dodged, a slash grazing his side. Blood spilled. He hissed, "All right, so you bite." Igris didn't stop. He pressed forward, relentless like the tide. Jinwoo was on the defensive now, each movement tighter, each dodge closer to death. A downward slash cracked the ground beneath them. Jinwoo skid back. He dropped one dagger, flipped the other in reverse grip, and smirked. "You're fast. Strong. Disciplined. You were a commander once, weren't you? But I'm not just some hunter anymore." A dark mist curled around Jinwoo's arms. His eyes glowed violet. "I am the Shadow Monarch." He vanished. Igris twisted just in time, too late. A dagger carved across his chest plate. Jinwoo ducked under the return strike, spun, and leapt onto the knight's back, plunging his blade toward the gap in the armor. But Igris vanished into shadows, reappearing above. A mid-air slash cracked the floor. Jinwoo rolled, blood on his lip now, breathing heavy. "TCH damn. You're enjoying this." For the first time, Igris moved his head slightly, as if to acknowledge the challenge. "Heh." Jinwoo wiped his mouth. "Fine. One last push." He roared, shadow energy exploding outward. Igris raised his blade. The air thickened with pressure. Everything else blurred. They charged, final clash. A storm of steel. A dance of monsters. Then silence. Jinwoo stood over the kneeling knight, his dagger pressed just above the chest plate, but unmoving. He was breathing hard, bloody, but standing. Igris slowly lowered his sword, and bowed, not out of defeat, but out of recognition. Jinwoo stared at him. "You were testing me." Igris didn't speak, but the way his aura bent, the way his head nodded, it said everything. "You weren't trying to win. You were making sure I was worthy." Dark energy began to swirl around the knight's body, wrapping him in shadow. "Then rise," Jinwoo said softly. "I accept you." The shadow sealed the knight in mist and disappeared into Jinwoo's shadow. "From now on, you're mine." The trial was over. The bond had been made. But far away, in another world, a child would be born, and the soul of the Crimson Knight would rise again. Crimson soul, human flesh. The rain fell hard that night, Kuo City was quiet, blanketed in a storm that rolled over the sky like a curtain of shadows. Thunder cracked above the rooftops, shaking windows. People stayed inside, lights dimmed, as if instinctively sensing that this wasn't just any night. Somewhere on the edge of the city, in a modest hospital, a child was being born. Screams echoed down the sterile hallway. Doctors and nurses moved fast, sweat beading on their brows, not from difficulty, but from pressure. The temperature in the delivery room had dropped suddenly, unnaturally, and they couldn't explain why the lights had flickered the moment the mother's water broke. The machine still worked, but there was a presence in the air, something unseen, watching. Inside, a woman clutched the bed, her body racked with pain. Her husband held her hand tightly, whispering to her, his voice shaking, not from fear but awe, because above their child, as he emerged into the world, was a red mist, faint, swirling, silent. No one else saw it, not even the mother, but the father did. He saw the mist take shape, only for a moment, a silhouette of a knight, tall, proud, eyes glowing beneath a horned helm, his body formed of shadow and steel. And then, gone. Just like that, the mist was gone, absorbed into the crying infant's chest as he wailed his first breath into the world. The lights returned to normal. The room warmed, and the baby opened his eyes, deep brown, but something ancient flickered beneath them, like burning coals hidden in the ashes. Issei, the mother whispered, exhausted but smiling. That's his name. The father said nothing for a long time. He just stared at his newborn son, his hand trembling slightly. Yeah, he said finally. Issei, a strong name. The baby stared up at the ceiling, blinking slowly, his crying fading. He was calm now, too calm. The years passed like a quiet tide. Issei Hayata grew up in an ordinary household, on an ordinary street, in an ordinary city. He smiled. He laughed. He played. He made trouble like any other boy. But there were moments where the ordinary cracked. When he fell off his bike at age 5, he didn't cry. He stood up with scraped knees and blood dripping from his chin, and simply stared at the pavement. His parents swore they saw the wound close faster than it should have. When a dog snapped at him in the park, its teeth inches from his face, Issei didn't scream or flinch. He just looked at it, and the dog stopped, tail between its legs. It backed away. And once, when he got lost in the woods behind the school on a field trip, they found him 3 hours later, standing perfectly still in front of an ancient, crumbling shrine. A sword carved from stone rested in the ground nearby, untouched for who knows how long. Issei didn't remember how he got there. But that night, he dreamed of fire. He dreamed of war. He dreamed of standing alone against an army, his crimson armor gleaming beneath a blood moon. 1,000 enemies. One blade. No fear. He woke up screaming, but didn't tell anyone. Because deep down, a part of him knew it wasn't just a dream. It was a memory. By the time he reached his teenage years, Issei had changed. Still goofy. Still perverted in the way boys can be. Still obsessed with girls. But beneath that surface, something stirred. A tension in his chest he couldn't explain. A strength that made him feel like a lion in a cage, always pacing, always waiting. Sometimes, when he was alone, he'd stare into the mirror and swear he could see flickers of red in his reflection. Sometimes, when he was angry, shadows would flicker unnaturally around him. And sometimes, in his sleep, he'd hear a voice. Loyal, deep, cold, yet protective. My liege, you are not weak. You are not lost. You are not human. Not fully. He didn't understand it. Not yet. But fate was already shifting. Because the knight who once knelt before a king was reborn into a world where monsters wore human faces and war brewed in secret. And the crimson soul within Issei would not sleep forever. The awakening of the Crimson Knight. The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over Kuo Academy. The school gates stood wide open, students pouring in, chatting excitedly about the day ahead, completely unaware of the storm that brewed just beneath the surface of their normal lives. Issei Hayata stood at the entrance, staring at the massive campus with a calm expression, his brown eyes dull, but deep within them, something flickered, something ancient, He wasn't like the other boys in his class anymore. He wasn't the carefree, perverted Issei who chased after girls, nor the one who laughed at trivial jokes. The boy who once lived in the shadow of desire was now a stranger to his own reckless whims. There was only focus, only control. He adjusted his school uniform, the sleeves slightly rolled up, his posture rigid. He didn't walk. He moved with purpose. The other students passed by him, some giving polite nods, but no one approached him. He wasn't cold. He wasn't rude. But there was an aura around him, unspoken, but undeniable. It was the same presence that had once surrounded warriors of old, knights who held themselves in high regard, their dignity as their weapon. Issei didn't feel the need for pleasantries. His mind was elsewhere. It was as though he could hear the faintest whispers of forgotten war, a clash of steel against steel, the roar of a battle long past. The bell rang. He entered the school building and walked to his classroom with quiet steps. The chatter of his classmates faded as his attention shifted inward, as though his very soul had become attuned to something far greater than the mundane school life he'd once known. Issei took his seat at the back of the classroom, his gaze distant, yet intense. His classmates continued with their usual banter, talking about their usual teenage problems, tests, gossip, plans for the weekend. But none of it reached him. He could still feel it. The presence. The crimson night. Igris. It was like a shadow that lingered in the back of his mind, watching, guiding, and waiting. Sometimes, he could almost hear the night's deep, steady voice. But when he focused, it was only silence. He was different. He wasn't sure when it had begun. It was subtle at first, a shift in his thoughts, a flicker of something old awakening inside him. His body felt lighter, stronger, his reflexes sharper. But it wasn't until the night he had the strange dream that it all began to make sense. In that dream, he had stood before an army, not as a frightened boy, but as a warrior, a king. His armor gleamed crimson, and his blade was as long as the horizon. And the people, his people, called to him. They needed him. But the voice he heard in that dream, it wasn't his. It was Igris. The night's soul had returned, and with it, the dormant bloodline of the Crimson Knight. Issei didn't know what to make of it, but the changes were undeniable. The students around him glanced back at him, some curious, others wary. He had been different ever since the previous day, and they could sense it. But Issei didn't care. He focused on his own thoughts. As the teacher walked in, Issei snapped back into reality. He didn't feel the need to act out in class. His mind was far beyond the simple lessons. As the teacher spoke, he listened, absorbing everything with a quiet intensity. Every word felt like it carried weight. The day passed slowly, but Issei didn't mind. He wasn't in a hurry. There was no urgency. During lunch, a group of students approached him. It was the usual group, students who had once tried to befriend him. They weren't bad people, but Issei's newfound composure and distance kept them at bay. They weren't the same. They didn't understand what he was becoming. "Issei, you've been so quiet lately." One of them, a girl named Yumi, remarked. "Are you okay? You seem different." Issei paused before answering, his eyes settling on her. "I'm fine," he replied, his voice calm, almost distant. "I'm just focused." The others exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. Normally, Issei would have cracked a joke, tried to make them laugh, or flirted with the girls. But now he was different, removed, unapproachable. It wasn't that he was rude. It was just that he wasn't the same person they had known. Focused on what? Yumi asked, her curiosity piqued. Issei didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out the window, as if seeing something beyond the school grounds, beyond the mundane. The night's presence lingered there, in the air, unseen but ever-present. "On what matters?" he said softly. There was a strange finality in his words, a sense of knowing. His classmates didn't press him any further. They had no way of understanding what had changed inside him. They only saw the boy they once knew, a boy who was no longer the same. As the day came to a close, Issei found himself walking home alone. The sun was setting, and the wind rustled the leaves in the trees. The world felt quieter, more focused, as if everything had slowed down for him to catch up. But deep inside, he could feel it, this pulse of energy, It wasn't human. It was the power of the Crimson Knight, the warrior's soul that now lived within him. And he knew, without a doubt, that his life was no longer ordinary. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He was something more. The Crimson Soul had awakened. A night of deception. The sun was sinking below the horizon, casting long shadows over the streets of Kuo. The cool evening breeze rustled through the trees, the scent of rain lingering in the air. Issei walked beside Yumi, his thoughts distant as he glanced at the girl beside him. She had been kind to him ever since his sudden change, and though she was an enigma to him, he didn't mind her company. Yumi was different from the others, calm, collected, not like the giggling girls who had always surrounded him in the past. She had an air of mystery about her that intrigued him, but something about her tonight made him uneasy, a strange feeling he couldn't quite place. "Issei, thanks for coming out tonight," Yumi said, her voice soft but carrying an underlying tension. "I've been wanting to spend time with you. I just feel like there's something different about you now, like you're not the same." Issei nodded, his face unreadable. He didn't respond at first, the weight of his own thoughts heavy on his mind. The memories, the night, the voice, everything was still so hazy, but he could feel the darkness, the sense of duty, pressing down on him. "Things have changed for me, yeah," Issei said quietly, "but I'm still me." Yumi smiled faintly, but didn't seem convinced. "I don't know, Issei. You've been acting different. It's like you're not even here sometimes. I'm worried about you." They walked down the familiar path toward the park, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the still evening air. Issei tried to push his unease aside, focusing on the moment at hand. He glanced at Yumi, who seemed unusually calm for a girl who was going on her first date with a boy like him. As they reached the edge of the park, the atmosphere shifted. A chill swept through the air, the wind picking up as dark clouds began to gather overhead. It was as though the world had suddenly taken a darker turn. Issei felt it, the faint sense of danger creeping in. Yumi stopped, her hand clenching around her purse as if to steady herself. "Issei, I don't think we should be here." Before Issei could react, Yumi's expression hardened. Her eyes, once soft and inviting, turned cold. The change was so sudden, it took him a moment to process what was happening. A dark energy surged around Yumi, and the air grew thick with tension. She took a step back, her body trembling slightly, but her gaze never wavered from Issei. "Yumi," Issei asked, his voice low. "What's going on?" Yumi's lips curled into a bitter smile. "You were always so naive, Issei. Did you really think you were safe? Did you think you could escape this?" Issei's heart skipped a beat as Yumi's form seemed to shimmer. Dark wings sprouted from her back, dark feathers unfurling like the wings of a fallen angel. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and the aura around her was no longer that of a sweet, innocent girl, but of something far more dangerous. "You're a fallen angel?" Issei muttered, the realization crashing over him. Yumi laughed, though it was devoid of warmth. "Not just any fallen angel, Issei. I was sent here to watch you, to keep an eye on you. And now that I've found you, you're no longer of any use. I'm here to end this little charade." Issei took a step back, his mind racing. The night within him stirred, but something in his gut, told him to hold back. There was no telling how powerful Yumi had become, or what she was capable of now. "Why are you doing this?" Issei asked, his voice calm but tense. "Because you don't belong here," Yumi replied coldly. "You never did. You are not human anymore, and your true purpose is much greater than you could ever imagine. But before you can realize it, I need to eliminate the weak parts of you, the parts that cling to this world." She took a step closer to him, her eyes glowing brighter now. "You were born to lead, to destroy, to reign." Issei felt a surge of anger, but he kept his composure. "I'm not what you think I am," he said firmly. "I don't care who sent you. You're not taking me anywhere." Yumi's expression twisted with frustration. "You still don't understand, do you? You can't run from your fate." Without warning, she raised her hand, and dark energy surged from her, swirling around her like a storm. The ground beneath them cracked, and the air grew thick with power. Issei's heart beat faster, but he stood his ground, not willing to back down. You're making a mistake, Issei said, his voice steady but growing stronger. The energy surged around Yumi again as she prepared to strike, but before she could unleash her attack, a flash of red, sharp, like a blade, cut through the air. Issei's mind flared to life, the presence of the Crimson Knight growing within him. In an instant, his body surged with power, his eyes glowing faintly with that same dangerous light that had appeared in his reflection. Without thinking, he raised his hand and felt the energy within him respond. I won't let you do this, he said, his voice now colder than before. The air around them crackled with tension. Yumi hesitated, as if something inside her recognized the power that was awakening within him. For a moment, it was just the two of them, locked in a silent battle of wills. The air felt heavy with the weight of destiny, and though Issei didn't understand it fully yet, he knew that this confrontation was just the beginning. Yumi's eyes narrowed, her grip tightening on the dark energy she controlled. But Issei was ready. He wasn't the same boy who had fallen victim to the whims of fate. He was something more, and whatever that was, it wouldn't be silenced. Clash of fates. The air was thick with tension, charged with the energy of the battle that was about to unfold. Issei stood his ground, his heart racing as he locked eyes with Yumi, now revealed as Reiner, a fallen angel. The ground beneath them seemed to tremble in anticipation, a dark energy swirling around her like a storm ready to burst. Reiner sneered, her dark wings fluttering in the heavy air. You still don't understand, do you, Issei? She taunted, her voice dripping with contempt. You may think you can fight back, but you're nothing. A mere human, playing at being something greater. Issei's eyes narrowed, his fists clenching at his sides. He could feel the power rising within him, the crimson soul stirring deep in his chest. He wasn't the same person who had walked into this world naive and unsure of his place. He was something else now, something that couldn't be ignored. I'm not going to let you get away with this, Issei muttered, his voice low and resolute. Reiner chuckled darkly, a sound that echoed ominously through the air. You really think you have a chance? You're nothing more than a pawn in a game you don't even understand, and now you're going to die like one. In a blur of motion, Reiner extended her hand, and a spear of light materialized in her palm. The light of the spear flickered with malice, illuminating her face in a cold, cruel grin. Die, Issei. She hurled the spear toward him with deadly accuracy. Issei barely had time to react, but the power within him surged to life. In an instant, a crimson aura exploded around him, and his body moved with a speed and precision that surprised even himself. The spear of light sailed past him, missing by mere inches. With a roar, Issei lunged forward, his fist clenched, ready to strike. The energy crackling around him was palpable, and the ground beneath him seemed to warp with his power. His strike was swift, aimed directly at Reiner, but she was ready. She twisted midair, evading his punch with a sharp movement. Her wings flapped, sending a shockwave through the air, pushing Issei back. The force of the impact threw him off balance, but he quickly regained his footing. You're faster than I expected, Reiner acknowledged, her eyes flashing with a mix of amusement and irritation. But speed won't save you. With a flick of her wrist, the spear in her hand disintegrated into light particles, only to reform into a series of sharp, glowing shards. She sent them flying at Issei, their edges gleaming with deadly intent. Issei's eyes narrowed, his instincts taking over. He extended his arm and, without even thinking, called on the power that had been building inside him. A crimson barrier exploded around him, deflecting the shards of light as they crashed harmlessly into the air around him. Reiner's eyes widened for a brief moment before she grinned. Impressive, she said, but no matter how much power you gain, it will never be enough to defeat me. She raised both hands to the sky, summoning a swirling vortex of dark energy. The wind picked up, howling as the very atmosphere seemed to warp around them. Lightning crackled in the distance, thunder booming like the roar of some ancient beast. I'll show you true power, Reiner hissed. She hurled the dark vortex toward Issei, the force of it knocking him back as it ripped through the air like a storm. The blast was too fast, too intense to dodge. Issei barely had time to react as the vortex engulfed him, sending him crashing to the ground. For a moment, everything went still. Issei's body was battered, his clothes torn from the force of the blast, but his chest still rose and fell with steady breaths. He could feel the power inside him, the crimson soul awakening more than ever. He wasn't done yet. With a roar, Issei forced himself up, pushing through the pain. His eyes burned with a fierce resolve. I'm not backing down. Not now, not ever. The ground beneath his feet cracked as the crimson energy exploded around him. His body was surrounded by a violent aura, as though his very soul was on fire. Rainier watched, her expression one of mockery. You think you can win? You're just a puppet. But her words did little to shake him. In the heat of battle, Issei had found something new, something that coursed through him like an unstoppable river. With a yell, he surged forward, a red blur in the air as he collided with Rainier. The force of the impact sent shock waves through the park, trees bending and cracking under the intensity of the collision. The two of them locked in a furious struggle, each blow from Issei pushing her back, each strike from Rainier slicing through the air. You don't know what you're dealing with. Rainier shouted as she tried to break free of Issei's relentless attacks. Her wings flared behind her, their edges sharp like blades. She swung one wing at him, but Issei was ready. He grabbed her wing mid-strike and twisted, throwing her off balance. With a powerful swing, he brought his fist down on her, sending her crashing into the ground with a thunderous impact. Rainier lay there for a moment, stunned, but quickly recovered. Her eyes burned with rage as she staggered to her feet. You think you've won? You're not even close. Issei, breathing heavily, took a step back. His body was battered, but the power inside him burned bright, unwavering. He could feel the darkness of the night's presence inside him, pushing him forward. I'll show you what it means to fight for your life, he said, his voice cold and filled with newfound strength. With a final, powerful charge, he launched himself toward Rainier, his fists surrounded by a torrent of crimson energy. This time, there would be no mercy. Eyes in the shadows. The park was eerily silent now, the storm subsiding as the last remnants of thunder echoed away into the distance. The ground was littered with debris from the brutal battle that had just taken place. Trees broken in half, shattered stone, and the remnants of the fallen angel's wings scattered on the grass. The wind blew through the empty park, carrying with it the scent of rain and blood. Issei stood at the edge of the park, his chest heaving with every breath, the crimson aura still faintly flickering around him. His eyes were narrowed, scanning the horizon, as if expecting something or someone to appear. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Slowly, he turned and began walking away from the destruction, the battle fading behind him. He didn't care about the wreckage or the fallen angel anymore. All that mattered was moving forward. The weight of the fight hung in the air, but Issei was already lost in his thoughts, his mind racing with what had just happened. Meanwhile, Rias Gremory stood in the shadows, hidden behind the tall bushes at the edge of the park. She had arrived just in time to witness the entire battle. Her crimson hair flowed gently in the wind, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light of the storm's aftermath. She had sensed something was off earlier in the day, but she hadn't expected to find herself standing here, watching a power unlike anything she had ever seen before. The moment Issei and Rainier began their fight, she had known she couldn't intervene. There was something about the energy emanating from Issei, a force that felt both terrifying and awe-inspiring. She had been able to feel it even from a distance, the dark power, the raw, untamed potential of someone who had just unleashed their true strength. Rias felt her heart race as she observed Issei. He was different. There was no mistaking it now. She watched as Issei ripped Rainier's wings off without hesitation, the sheer brutality of it shocking her. It was a moment that almost felt unreal, something straight out of a nightmare. And yet, in that moment, she couldn't tear her eyes away. Issei was not the same boy she had met days ago. He had changed. The way he fought, the raw intensity in his movements. It was clear that something inside him had awakened. She had seen many battles, fought alongside her own allies. But this was something else. Something she couldn't explain. But what caught her attention the most was his resolve, his unwavering conviction. His complete rejection of everything Rainier had tried to manipulate him with. Issei wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting to define who he was, to set his own path, to make sure no one ever used him again. As she stood there, hidden in the shadows, Rias couldn't help but feel a pull toward him, a strange connection that she couldn't quite explain. She had heard rumors of the boy who had survived the ambush, the one with the power to change the course of everything. She hadn't believed it until now. And yet, even as she admired his strength, she felt a twinge of worry. He was a potential threat, an unknown force, someone with power that could change the world, someone who, if left unchecked, could easily become more than just an ally. Rias's eyes narrowed as she watched Issei walk away from the scene, his back to her. The silence that followed his departure was almost suffocating. "Who are you, Issei Hayadu?" she whispered under her breath, her voice filled with curiosity and caution. "And what are you really capable of?" She wasn't sure what path Issei would take now that he had seen the truth of his own power, but one thing was certain. The world was about to change, and she would have to keep a very close eye on him. Issei didn't feel anyone watching him as he left the park, but something deep within him told him that this moment wasn't as isolated as it seemed. He couldn't shake the feeling that the eyes on him were not of the human world. Someone, had been waiting, observing his every move. He didn't know why he felt it, but he couldn't ignore it. The weight of the battle still hung in the air, but for the first time in a long while, Issei felt a strange kind of freedom. His purpose was becoming clearer. His power was only just beginning to show itself, and whoever was watching, they would soon learn that Issei Hayadu was no longer just a boy. He was something else entirely. The dream realm. The night was quiet, the storm long past, leaving behind a calm stillness. The lights in Issei's room flickered for a moment, and then everything settled into a deep silence. The usual hum of the world outside seemed distant as he lay on his bed, staring up at the ceiling. The events of the day, the battle, the brutal clash with Rainier, felt like they belonged to another world. His body still hummed with the remnants of that energy, that power he barely understood. But his mind was restless, unable to shake the feeling that something deep within him had awakened. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the noise in his head. His heartbeat slowed as his muscles relaxed. Sleep overtook him, and he drifted into unconsciousness. The world around him shifted. Issei found himself standing in an endless void. The air was thick, oppressive, and yet strangely calm. The space around him stretched on forever, as if the universe itself was suspended in an eternal moment. And then he saw it. A throne. It stood in the center of the void, regal and imposing, carved from obsidian stone. The throne seemed to absorb the light around it, casting the area in shadow. And upon that throne sat a figure. A man. A knight. Igris. His form was imposing, tall, armored, and cloaked in an aura of power that seemed to distort the very air around him. His armor was black as night, adorned with crimson accents, and his eyes, piercing, eternal, glowed like molten embers. Issei couldn't help but feel a strange pull toward him, as if the sight of Igris awakened something deep inside him. A connection he couldn't explain. Igris's gaze remained fixed on him, unblinking, unwavering. The throne he sat upon was like a seat of power, one that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless worlds. The air between them crackled with an unspoken tension, the weight of untold history hanging in the balance. Then Igris spoke. "Issei." His voice was deep, resonating with authority. It carried the weight of centuries, a voice that seemed to echo across time and space. "You stand before me, not as a boy, but as something far greater. Do you understand what you have become?" Issei didn't respond immediately. His mind was racing. He had questions, so many questions. Who was this man? Why was he here in his dreams? And why did he feel familiar? As if he had known him for lifetimes. But all he could do was stare at the figure before him, unable to speak. Igris's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he could see straight through Issei's confusion. "You are not just a human. You are the Crimson Soul, reborn in flesh, the warrior who once stood as a knight. And now the world awaits you." Issei's chest tightened. The words felt like a thunderclap in his mind. The power within you is both a gift and a curse, Igris continued, his gaze unwavering. It is your birthright, but also your burden. A burden that you must choose to bear, or cast aside. Igris rose from the throne, his armored form towering over Issei. His presence was overwhelming, a force that commanded attention. He took a step forward, and Issei instinctively took a step back, but he couldn't move far. The void seemed to stretch infinitely in every direction. You will face trials, Igris said. Monsters, betrayal, and enemies beyond imagination. But you, Issei, have the strength to overcome them all. If you dare to embrace what you are. Issei clenched his fists, trying to steady his nerves. There was so much he didn't understand, so much he was afraid of. But there was something else, too. A spark of resolve, a fire within him that was beginning to burn brighter. Igris's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. Do not fear the power you possess, Igris said, his voice softening for the first time. Embrace it. It is the only way forward. The world is changing, and so must you. With those words, Igris raised his hand, and the entire void seemed to shimmer. The shadows around them twisted and formed shapes, figures, creatures, all reaching for Issei, calling to him. The time has come, Issei Hayadu. Igris's voice was a whisper now, like a wind carrying ancient secrets. Will you accept your destiny? Before Issei could respond, the world around him began to crack. The images, the shadows, everything fractured, shattering like glass. And just like that, Issei was awake. He sat up quickly, gasping for air as the remnants of the dream faded. His heart pounded in his chest, and his body was covered in a cold sweat. What was that? Was it a dream? A vision? His mind was still racing, trying to piece together the fragments of what had just happened. But one thing was certain. Igris wasn't just a dream. He was real, and he had a purpose for Issei. The question now was, what would Issei do with the power that had been awakened inside him? A new day. The sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting soft rays over Issei's room. It was a new day. The storm from the night before had passed, leaving behind clear skies and a sense of calm. Issei blinked awake, the remnants of his dream with Igris still lingering at the edge of his mind. But as he sat up, rubbing his eyes, it felt like just another night. The dream, the visions of power of a past life, of Igris on his throne, it all seemed distant now. He stretched, yawning, and glanced at the clock. It was time to get ready for school. With a sigh, Issei swung his legs off the bed, his feet touching the cool floor. He could still feel the remnants of the dream, a burning fire within him, but he pushed it aside. It was just a dream, right? Just another strange, vivid dream. Nothing more. He shook his head as if to clear it, and grabbed his uniform from the chair. The same uniform he wore every day. The same routine. He was just Issei Hayadu, a regular high school student. No, not regular. He had powers, something more than human. But he couldn't let himself focus on that right now. He had to live his life. He had to act like nothing had changed, like he wasn't the Crimson Soul, or a reincarnated knight, or whatever it was that Igris had called him. He glanced at the mirror. His reflection stared back at him, looking just as normal as ever. Brown hair, brown eyes. He didn't look like the kind of person who could wield the power of a warrior who had stood on a battlefield long ago. But deep down, he knew it was there. With a sigh, Issei ran his fingers through his hair and quickly dressed. His mind briefly flickered back to the dream. Will you accept your destiny? The words echoed in his head, but he shook them away. There was no time to dwell on that. After a quick breakfast, eggs, toast, and some milk, he grabbed a school bag and made his way out the door. Have a good day, Issei, his mom called after him. Thanks, Mom, he replied, a half-smile on his face. The day felt normal, uneventful. He'd go to school, meet with his friends, and maybe mess around a little, just like any other day. But even as he walked toward school, there was a quiet tension in the air. Something was different, but Issei couldn't put his finger on it. He passed by the park, the very same park where he'd met Rainier just the night before. The memories of that battle, of ripping her wings off and feeling that primal rage, lingered like a shadow in his chest. But he didn't linger. He kept walking, the humdrum of the city around him offering no hints that anything extraordinary had happened. As he approached the gates of Kuo Academy, he noticed a few students gathered by the entrance, chatting and laughing. Some were looking at their phones, others were in deep conversation. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. "Hey, Issei," one of his classmates called. It was Matsuda, one of his two friends. Matsuda waved at him from a distance, and Issei gave him a nod, his lips curling into a casual smile. "Hey, Matsuda," he called back. The two of them exchanged a fist bump before Issei entered the school grounds. For a moment, everything felt like it always had. The normal routine, the same people, the same faces. But deep inside him, there was a growing feeling of unease. Something was waking within him, something powerful and ancient. He couldn't explain it, but he couldn't ignore it either. He entered his classroom, took his usual seat by the window, and tried to focus on the lesson. But even as the teacher spoke about the subject of the day, Issei's mind kept drifting. What was he really? He clenched his fists beneath the desk, his thoughts a swirling mass of confusion and determination. Igris's words echoed once more. "You are not just human. You are the Crimson Soul." He took a deep breath and refocused. He couldn't let his thoughts spiral. Not today. Not now. The bell rang, and the students started chatting among themselves as the teacher assigned homework. Issei looked out the window, the world outside moving at its usual pace. People were walking, talking, and living their lives, unaware of the hidden war brewing beneath the surface of the world. And here he was, caught in the middle of it. But for now, he had to play his part. He couldn't let the world know what he was. Not yet. Later that day, after school, Issei walked home with a strange sense of calm. Everything felt like it should. But deep down, he knew something had changed. The world wasn't the same, and neither was he. When he reached home, his mom was busy preparing dinner, the familiar smells of home cooking filling the air. Issei sat at the kitchen table, his mind still racing with questions. Will you accept your destiny? He had no answer for that yet. But one thing was certain. His life would never be the same. Not after the night he had faced Rainier. Not after the dream with Igris. And as the evening settled in, Issei couldn't shake the feeling that soon, very soon, the world would force him to face the power within him. For now, though, he would live like nothing had changed. Tomorrow would come, and with it, new challenges. But whatever was to come, Issei was ready to face it. Accepting fate, the moon hung high above Kuo City, casting a cool glow over the streets. Issei sat on the roof of his house, staring up at the starless sky, the quiet hum of the city below him almost soothing. He hadn't been able to shake the strange feeling that had taken root in him after his dream. Igris's voice still echoed in his mind. Will you accept your destiny? Issei's gaze was distant, his thoughts far away. He'd spent most of the day trying to pretend that everything was normal, attending school, chatting with his friends, living his usual life. But inside, something had shifted. A part of him felt like it was pulling away, like his old self was slipping through his fingers, replaced by something far older and more powerful. The voice of Igris, deep and commanding, resonated inside his chest, like the beat of a forgotten war drum. He had felt his power, his strength, like a smoldering ember beneath his skin. That night in the park, when he had torn Rainier's wings from her back, he had felt it fully. He wasn't just a regular high school student. He wasn't even fully human anymore. That much had become painfully clear. But what did it mean? What was he supposed to do with this power? He exhaled sharply, rubbing his face with his hands. The question swirled inside him, but one thing was certain. Igris hadn't given him a choice. He had been born into something greater than himself, something ancient, the Crimson Soul. With a quiet resolve, Issei stood and climbed off the roof, walking inside. The house was quiet, save for the soft sound of his mother humming in the kitchen. He didn't want to be here. Not tonight. With his bag slung over his shoulder, he left the house. The streets were empty, save for the occasional passerby lost in their own thoughts, unaware of the darkness that lingered just beneath the surface. Issei knew where he was going. He walked without hesitation, the cool night air brushing against his face. The park, the place where it had all started, the place where his true nature had been revealed. As he walked through the gates, a sense of foreboding settled over him. The park was silent tonight, as if holding its breath, waiting for something. And then he saw it. A figure standing beneath the old oak tree. A shadowed silhouette. But as Issei's eyes adjusted to the darkness, he knew exactly who it was. Igris, the fallen knight, now a haunting figure in the world of his dreams. Igris stood tall and proud, his crimson armor gleaming faintly under the moonlight. His face was hidden behind a dark helm, but the presence he exuded was undeniable. He was the embodiment of war and strength, a warrior from another time. "You came." Igris's voice echoed in the air, deep and commanding, as though it was made to resonate with the very earth itself. Issei took a steady breath, his heart pounding. This was it, the moment he had been dreading, and yet, the moment he knew was inevitable. "I came," Issei replied, his voice steady, though his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Igris turned slightly, his head tilting as if appraising the boy who stood before him. "You know why you are here, don't you?" Issei nodded slowly. "Because I'm not just some regular human. I'm different. I'm the Crimson Soul." Igris's voice softened, but there was an edge of approval in it. "You are more than human, Issei. You are the rebirth of a knight, a warrior forged from fire and blood. You have the power to shape the future, but only if you accept who you truly are." Issei took another step forward, feeling the weight of the words settle over him. "And what does that mean? What do I have to do?" Igris's eyes, even hidden behind the helm, seemed to glow with an intensity that made Issei's skin prickle. "You must embrace your power. You must stop running from what you are. The world is changing, and there are enemies who will seek to destroy everything you care about. The path you choose will define not only your fate, but the fate of countless others." Issei's mind raced. He had been living a lie, pretending to be just a normal teenager when he knew deep down that he was far from ordinary. And now here he was, standing before a fallen knight, a warrior who had lived and died long ago, asking him to accept the truth, a truth he had been running from. "Issei," Igris continued, "there's no going back. If you accept your power, you will have to fight, not just for yourself, but for those who cannot protect themselves. The world is full of darkness, and you, my liege, are the only one who can bring balance to it." The words hit Issei hard. He wasn't ready. He hadn't asked for this. But deep down, a part of him knew that Igris was right. His life would never go back to normal. The darkness, the power, he had already felt it, and it was only a matter of time before it consumed him completely. With a deep breath, Issei looked up at Igris. The resolve in his chest hardened. "I accept," he said, his voice unwavering. "I'll accept my destiny." Igris remained silent for a moment, and then slowly, he nodded. "Then rise, Crimson Soul. Embrace the warrior within." As soon as the words left Igris's lips, the air around them seemed to change. The ground beneath Issei's feet trembled slightly, and for a moment, he felt a surge of power coursing through him. His vision blurred as the world around him began to shift, the shadows seeming to darken and twist. "I am ready," Issei muttered to himself, his hands clenching into fists. The fire inside him burned brighter, hotter, and for the first time, he felt at peace with what he was becoming. His past, his future, it all began now. If you want to see what happens next, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any updates. And hey, if you have friends who love what-if scenarios like this or are fans of anime like Anime Uchiha X, tell them about the channel. Let's grow this community and explore these stories together. Stay tuned for the next part of What If Issei Was the Reincarnation of Igris, and many more adventures to come.